Good afternoon, everybody. I've frequently had the pleasure to introduce folks today on other occasions, and today I'm pleased to introduce somebody who's a friend. Terry Mazany is the 6th president and CEO in the Chicago Community Trust's 98-year history. He began by leading the Trust's $50 million commitment to education campaign and served as interim CEO for the Chicago Public Schools at one time. He's also been a board member with Lester McKeever of the Federal Reserve. His degrees include a master's in education leadership from the University of Illinois at Chicago. Please welcome Terry Mazany.
Thank you, Tony. I vying for the position of the #1 fan in the Tony Preckwinkle fan club. So it's a distinct honor to be introduced by her. What's happening in the county is just remarkable. I'm also here to dispel the rumor that the Chicago Community Trust is moving out into the suburbs. We are not. There is no news to be made today on that note. Where does the Chicago Community Trust go? Aren't we here? It's kind of like the Cubs. Before I go farther, I have to acknowledge my beautiful wife who devotes so much time and effort to keep me going strong and sacrifices so much. So thank you, Lottie, for everything. Many of you ask, how are you able to do so much? That is the reason. So this is my 3rd time speaking before the City Club, and I want to thank Jay Doherty for this opportunity to deliver what I hope becomes the Chicago Community Trust annual State of the Community Address. This year, coinciding with the Trust's 98th anniversary. I know many of you attended our celebration of the amazing work of Chicago's nonprofit organizations earlier this week, and I thank you for joining us. I want to acknowledge my colleagues at the Trust who have joined me today. And I want to recognize our partners in so much of our work, including Metropolis Strategies, the MacArthur Foundation, the McCormick Foundation, Joyce Foundation, looking forward to hearing Ellen Alberding later, along with several other foundations who are constant partners for everything that we do. In fact, virtually everything we do with others, and the way I look at the world, given the magnitude of the challenges that we face, if we could be doing something by ourselves, chances are it wouldn't be worth doing. Part of the strength of the Trust is the composition of our board, appointed by civic leaders to represent the diverse and shared interests of Metropolitan Chicago. Let me take a moment to recognize the executive committee members who are in attendance here. We've got Jack Catlin. He brings an expertise as an architect for universal design and leads our Persons with Disabilities Fund. King Harris, his expertise in housing and regional development. Jess Ruiz was introduced earlier. Education, both at the state and now at the city level, and law. And Mary Richardson Lowry, also with deep experience in education as former president of the school board and as a lawyer. Very gifted to have this type of expertise with our board. It is with their leadership that over the past few years, the assets of the Chicago Community Trust have rebounded from the depths of the financial crisis. And today we celebrate a new high water mark for our total assets of $1.9 billion. This was fueled by a 19% return in our fiscal 2012, thanks in large part to our trustee banks. Oh, and so those of you thinking of, are your philanthropic dollars going to grow? 19% return is a pretty good return there. Over the past year, we've received record levels of contributions, $179 million, contributions that demonstrate the profound generosity of donors in the region, and which in turn allowed the Trust to distribute record levels of grants totaling $175 million last year. We are currently engaged with our centennial campaign to raise $1 billion to ensure that future generations of Chicagoans have the resources available for the unimagined needs that they will face. The Trust has an inclusive vision for Metropolitan Chicago. We envision a region where prosperity is broadly shared and where every resident has meaningful opportunities to advance their dreams for a better life. Our mission, our mandate, is to help realize that vision by inspiring and leading philanthropic efforts that measurably improve the quality of life and the prosperity of our region and its residents. Above all, we seek to create a place where one can pass along a better future to one's children, a place where hope and opportunity, development and progress abound. Simply put, a place where everyone has an equal shot at reaching the rungs on the ladder of opportunity. Unfortunately, for far too many, the rungs of that ladder seem too far out of reach. As many of you know, the Trust occupies a unique position. We are funded and guided by donors and corporate leaders who have prospered in Chicago and wish, through their generosity, to ensure opportunities for others, now and in perpetuity. We are a partner with government and nonprofits working to forge a common agenda to move the city forward. We are a partner with the diverse communities that together define the soul of our city. We serve millions of residents through our funding of hundreds of nonprofit organizations that address their specific challenges. The breadth of our relationships gives the Trust powerful insights into the challenges and opportunities that are present at any given time. Our priorities are defined by 4 overarching community goals: education and economic development, health, housing, and human services, civic and cultural vitality, and sustainable development. People ask me how the Trust is doing. The answer: busy, very busy. In my 12 years at the Trust, I can't recall a busier time. Our capacity to handle all of this is a tribute to our incredible staff, many of whom are here today. Here's just a sampling of what we are supporting. Implementation of the Common Core curriculum, workforce development, foreclosure prevention, reducing the jail populations, nonprofit mergers and back office collaborations, supporting the Cook County Forest Preserve's Next Century plan to protect and expand open space, implementation of the Affordable Care Act, which will enroll more than 500,000 people in Cook County alone, figuring out what will be required to implement immigration reform, partnering with the Department of Cultural Affairs and Special Events to implement the city's cultural plan, championing the 2.0 version of our plan to end homelessness, supporting the coordinated planning for Millennium Reserve. That's just in the morning. Wait till we get to the afternoon. So it's from this broad perspective that I speak to you today. And I promise that I will end my remarks with a vision of optimism based on the wealth of incredible opportunities that hold great promise for Chicago's future. But let's first review the troubling trends and harsh reality facing far too many in our region. We know from the grant requests the Trust gets, from the site visits with our grant applicants, and from our work with partners across the region, that renewed prosperity is not shared by all. In fact, there is a sense of urgency and desperation in these requests. Our community's social service systems are at a breaking point, and organizations of all types continue to close their doors. The greatest threats, as I see it, to Chicago's future are disparity and inequality of opportunity. As stewards of the future, we worry that the specter of diminishing our unequal access to opportunity threatens our city's potential. It is opportunity, after all, that has been Chicago's greatest asset, attracting successive waves of immigrants over the past 100 years. This is no longer the case. The influx of immigrants that buttressed our city's growth in the 2000 census has now flattened out statewide and declined in our city. Chicago continues to lose middle and low-income population. The census tells us that the city of Chicago lost 200,000 residents over the past decade, while the megaloop, a term coined by Cranes, has gained 50,000 new residents, meaning that the remainder of the city actually lost 250,000 residents. As a result, we have the fastest growing growth in high-income folks moving into the central city and the largest exodus of middle and low-income people moving out. Like the proverbial canary in the coal mine, when a city is bypassed by immigrants and when even the poor leave, those actions should be read as danger signs that economic opportunities are lacking at even the lowest rungs on the ladder. Following the Great Recession, income disparities between rich and poor have only widened, and the vast majority of our fellow Chicagoans have seen their incomes drop by as much as 11%. These disparities are driven in part by the changing structure of our job market. The Chicago metropolitan region lost 600,000 jobs since the recession, jobs in sectors like manufacturing and construction that paid sustainable wages. These jobs were replaced by low-wage jobs in the service sector. A recently published map of Chicago created by the social commentator Richard Florida tells the story. Chicago is now a city of few traditional working class jobs, the blues in the picture, and a concentration of highly paid professionals, the purple, in a growing area of red, those who work in an ever-increasing low-wage service sector. Today, a full 74% of our city earns less than $35,000 a year. When we expand our view of the city, we see that the working class jobs have moved to the suburbs, a fact also documented by CMAP in their study of our manufacturing industry. Taking a look at a few maps of Chicago's neighborhoods, we see the concentration of population growth following along the North Shore, while most other neighborhoods lost population. We see high rates of unemployment, as high as 50% in some neighborhoods across the city, while low unemployment is restricted to only a few neighborhoods. Correspondingly, we see that the highest levels of income are tightly concentrated in our urban core, whereas the majority of Chicago's neighborhoods are home to low-income residents and families. And widespread poverty continues to hollow out our communities. The Voorhees Center at UIC combines measures like these into an index that rates each neighborhood. The index shows the magnitude of change in our neighborhoods over the past decade. In the year 2000, the city was roughly balanced 50-50 for distressed neighborhoods and prospering neighborhoods. In 2010, we see a marked compression of prosperous neighborhoods and an increase in the number experiencing decline. In summary, it appears that population loss was accelerated by the foreclosure crisis. Persistent levels of high unemployment were exacerbated by the substitution of middle and high-wage jobs with low-wage employment, all leading to outmigration by individuals and families seeking better wages or a lower cost of living. What is the result? Entire neighborhoods devastated by foreclosure and increased poverty that threatens to swamp the capacity of our faltering safety net. You might think these pictures are of Detroit, but they are here in Chicago, where we have a single home standing on entire blocks. So that's the doom and gloom. Let me outline a few things we can do to reverse the downward spiral and reinvent Chicago in our generation. They involve addressing the foundation of a renewed and sustainable economy, that is education, neighborhood revitalization, and regional economic development. First and foremost, we need to double down on education. The facts are widely known. The vast majority of new jobs will require higher education, and people without a high school diploma are likely to be without a job. By 2020, our workforce will be majority African American and Latino, the two populations that currently have the highest high school dropout rates and lowest levels of college success. Despite this long recognized imperative for education, for more than a decade, the state has failed to meet the funding levels recommended by the state's own Education Funding Advisory Board. From a shortfall of $120 per pupil in the year 2000 to more than $2,600 this year. If you total this underfunding over the past decade for our state's 2 million students, it comes to over $20 billion, dollars that we have taken from those with the least political power in our state. And I want to acknowledge Ralph Materi of the Center of Tax and Budget Accountability for providing this information. I am sure we can all agree that education is the key to both opportunity and prosperity in our region, and yet the proposed budget for Illinois cuts $400 million in education spending, crowded out by the $1 billion increase in pension payments. Using a metaphor common in an agricultural state, we are eating our seed corn. That is our children's future. How do we address this problem? Step one, we fully commit to fully funding education. Step two, we need to get the state's financial house in order. The temporary increase in our state's income tax is scheduled to sunset in 2015. The specter of a financial crisis resulting from this rollback in tax rates provides a clear opportunity to rethink our state's tax policy and consider a progressive tax formula. My dream scenario is to place all of this new revenue in an education lockbox with the requirement that all proceeds must be directed to full funding of the recommended foundation level of per pupil spending. After all, pensions are protected by a lockbox. I think we owe it to our children to protect their inheritance with a lockbox for education funding. And while ensuring that our young population succeeds, we have a second educational challenge. Chicago has the nation's largest population of college students. 275,000 undergrads and postgraduate students come here to learn and gain professional skills. This is the true source of our global competitiveness and the talent to drive Chicago's new economy. Yet too often we do not retain them after graduation. Facing an absence of jobs or investment capital or nurturing incubators, many of these promising entrepreneurs of the future head to either coast, to cities with an apparent greater desire to invest in the young in the future. Key investments in incubators such as 1871 and its 225 startups in year one, and the Chicago Biomedical Consortium, funded by the Searle funds at the Chicago Community Trust, can add to our region's retention of talent. Next, we need to reverse the decline of Chicago's neighborhoods. Our strength in a global economy is our diversity, and we must preserve the vitality that attracts diverse residents to live in our city. You may not know this, but the city publishes a hardship index, and you can see the magnitude of hardship from this map. You can also see the logic of the 7 neighborhoods selected by the mayor for specific investments. A key to revitalizing declining neighborhoods is affordable housing. One great experiment, and frankly unheralded success was the Plan for Transformation, in which the Trust played a role together with the MacArthur Foundation. While news reports have focused on the former residents, the untold story is of rising neighborhoods that had long suffered under the weight of CHA projects. Recall that in the year 2000, CHA projects constituted 14 of the nation's 15 poorest communities. Today, even after the housing bubble burst, where blighted buildings once stood, there are thriving mixed-income neighborhoods like the one we can see at Oakwood Shore, where even new construction has resumed. Housing prices have risen and held at a higher rate than the city as a whole, and commercial investment in needed stores and the jobs they offer has risen as much as 300%. Building on what we've learned, we need a clear master plan for every Chicago neighborhood that defines opportunities, charting a course for the revitalization of each. Finally, we need to grow the economy by aligning our infrastructure and investments for economic growth. The World Business Chicago Plan for Economic Growth and Jobs provides a comprehensive framework for these coordinated investments, and we're beginning to see results. When we prioritize infrastructure investments, we must prioritize maintaining Chicago as the nation's preeminent transportation center, a center of air travel, trucking, and the undisputed center of the nation's rail industry. On this point, I can highlight the cooperation of the city, county, state, and federal government working together on the CREATE plan, a joint project that improves the rail system of our region. The goal is to remove the delays that threaten our continued strength in this important economic sector that employs 36,000 people in high-wage jobs in Cook County alone. And I want to acknowledge the role that Randy Blankenhorn and CMAP play in this vital regional work. Only a third completed and funded, the project has already reduced passenger delays by 34% and accelerated freight movement by 28%. As important, the government's billion-dollar investment has triggered corresponding investment of $3 billion from the railroads themselves. The opportunity here lies in immediately fully funding CREATE so that we can retain our national and global leadership in freight transportation and not open the door to rivals who think they can topple our preeminent standing. Everything is teed up, the plans are in place, we just need the capital to drive this forward. And of course, we need to build out our local transportation system, the CTA, to make certain that every neighborhood connects to the center of the city and to its outskirts, so that residents can easily access the jobs that match their skills. Extending the Red Line to Roseland would mean that 400,000 more jobs could be easily reached by Roseland residents within an hour of travel. This is a project that the Trust has steadfastly supported with grants to the Developing Communities Project to advance the case for the Red Line extension. A second, less visible infrastructure investment is in the digital highway. Chicago is the home to the world's broadband network hub, called the Starlight International and National Communications Exchange Facility, that moves data at 100 gigabits per second. So think of downloading 25 movies from iTunes in a single second, and that will give you some sense of the speed we're talking about. These speeds are critical for high-performing networking in healthcare, advanced communications for research and fields like nanotechnology, and truly real-time processing of billions of financial trading transactions or millions of high-resolution 3D models for architecture, automotive, or aeronautic designs. At present, the system is for research endeavors. It's time to unleash its commercial value. Broadband is also an essential element in a strategy to revitalize neighborhoods. Connectivity is key for residents in our neighborhoods to thrive in this rapidly changing world. Thanks in part to the Smart Chicago Collaborative between the Trust, the MacArthur Foundation, and the city, Chicago has become the first city in which every resident can access the internet with the aid of free computers and computer learning, all within a mile of their homes. As we all know, for Chicago, for Illinois to succeed, we need to streamline and create more disciplined government. While I need not speak to you about the urgent need for the pension reform, which is clearly on everybody's minds, and I think we're hopeful today, we also need to address and reform the fragmentation of 1,200 units of government in our region that sap our resources and undermine effective joint action. We need regional government coordination to establish regional priorities and make coordinated strategic investments focused on expanding our economy in key industry clusters that will generate high and medium skilled jobs. Let me cite the example of Funklinko that spans two key clusters, manufacturing and transportation distribution logistics. They are in the business of steel fabrication and apply advanced manufacturing techniques such as high-definition plasma cutting. Their products include components for energy-efficient locomotives and wind energy. Funklinko's growth benefits both our regional competitiveness and it delivers high-wage jobs. What can our governments do to help them and hundreds of other firms grow and compete to bring rail industry production to our region? We can form a regional economic development authority that can work with businesses to assist their location and growth by overcoming the myriad local ordinances that add time and cost to business investment decisions. Within the city, we can streamline the process of decision-making for business investments to attract national firms that will bring new capital to our city. Chicago is ideally sized and located to become the model for a 21st century sustainable city. We have talent like Adrian Smith and Gordon Gill, architects of the Chicago Central Area Decarbonization Plan, and the promise of a paradigm for a carbon-neutral city. A wide range of examples have been compiled by the Green Ribbon Committee and the Corporate Sustainability Working Group in their recently released report. But there's a bigger prize to be had. Eventually, we will need to shift away from a lifestyle that views all resources as consumable, generating substantial waste, to a lifestyle that views resources as having value to be recycled in one way or another. Our competitive advantage is researchers like Sarah Taylor Lovell at the University of Illinois who are working on the challenge of moving to a sustainable ecosystem for our region. The topics that I've covered today only scratch the surface of the potential and opportunities we can seize. To do this requires leadership, vision, and collaboration. There are no quick fixes or easy answers, but there is a clear path for what needs to be done to secure our future. Acting individually, even with the best intentions, our vision, promise, and progress will be agonizingly slow. But working together, there is absolutely nothing we can't achieve. Here, philanthropy can play a role, not just in terms of funding, but by convening stakeholders from all sectors to work together to address the greater good. The opportunity we have at hand is to reinvent the city for the 21st century, not only for ourselves, but for the future well-being of the world. A sustainable city that offers a fair measure of opportunity for all. An inclusive city that engages the full range of talents and voices of its residents. What gives me confidence is the character of Chicago itself. This is the city that works. This is the city that pulls together when the world is pulling apart. This is the city that makes big plans and delivers on those plans. No other city has so fully expressed the essential character of the American spirit that can overcome impossible odds and accomplish great things. We are called upon to do this yet again, and we can do this. Thank you for listening.
Wow, that's a lot of work you've been doing. Once again, if you have any questions, I see there's one way up back there. Please make sure they're brought up to the front of the podium, and I'm sure Terry will answer them. Before I go to the first question and allow time for the questions to make their way up to the podium, I want to just give you a personal thanks for the support of the Community Trust of our bold participatory budgeting experiment. Many of you might know that I, together with 3 of my city council colleagues, have taken $1 million of our discretionary funds that we get to spend on capital projects in our respective wards and turn it over to our members of our community in a process in which community members pick the projects and that would be qualified for a ballot, and then ultimately the voters vote on how their tax dollars are being spent. It's an exercise in direct democracy, and it is really, in our communities, has restored trust in, or helped to at least restore a little bit of trust in government, and is in keeping with the goals of transparency and community engagement. And Chicago Community Trust was essential in providing us with some of the seed dollars that made this process work. And we're this week voters in 4 wards, the 49th ward, the 5th ward, the 45th ward, and the 46th ward are voting and engaging in this exercise in direct democracy. So thank you on behalf of my residents and the residents of those 4 wards and all of us who believe in democracy. All right, the first question is from Jerry Donnelly, who is a member. He's affiliated with the Morton Arboretum, and he writes, the Chicago Community Trust has such a strong legacy of accomplishment and focus in the city of Chicago, but now is active at the regional level. What is the trust strategy and priorities for the Chicago metropolitan region? You want to expand on some of the comments you made in your opening remarks?
Great. Yeah. Thank you for the question. One of the recognitions that's occurred is that Chicago is stronger as a region in the work that the Brookings Institute did on Metro Nation, identifying that for the 21st century, global competition will be played out by these metropolitan regions around the globe. And we were fortunate to have the leadership of CMAP coming together, thanks to the merger forged by Metropolis 2020, to create a true regional planning entity. And in the Go-To 2040 plan, that lays out the blueprint, and it makes our work easy because we strive to support the initiatives for the implementation and fidelity of the Go-To 2040 plan.
The next question is from Len Dominguez, Educare Associates. Good to hear from Len. A question, from your position and perspective at the Community Trust, and I would add parenthetically also as your former position as CEO of the Chicago Public Schools, how do you view the school closing issue and the impact on those communities? A softball question, Terry.
And now I do have to be careful here because I could make news on this question.
The camera's rolling.
Yeah, exactly. So when I was CEO of the Chicago Public Schools, we had a clear understanding of the mismatch between population and school facility. So it's no secret, we've all known this. The reality of closing any school is wrenching for the children, families, and communities, and there's no denying that. And I think the sensitivity that has been given to that recognition is really vital. At the same time, you saw the numbers, you saw the maps and the statistics here. The reality is that we have large tracts of land in our city that have become depopulated. And we do have to make these much better to do it in a planful way than as we've seen in Detroit and some other cities that have had to make this lurching set of decisions in a very difficult way, to be planful about this, to be sensitive to the needs of the community. We will work through this. Our interest at the Chicago Community Trust is about ensuring that the students end up with superior education options, and that we are focused on strengthening those communities so that now, as we do have a movement of families and students, we're able to get about the business of revitalizing all of Chicago's neighborhoods.
All right. Next question is from Steve T. He didn't give his full last name. Mr. T, are you around? There he is. Oh, that's okay. I sometimes have those moments too. I forget my last name. Okay, quote, education lockbox. Great idea. What ideas do you have for the politics of getting there from here?
Well, clearly I have the luxury of not having a political post and not having to deliver on a wild-eyed policy statement like the one that I made. But I do hope that the analogy takes root, and that is, how do we protect from sitting politicians who are making myriad choices with scarce resources? How do we protect what the state itself defines as the essential level of funding required for, their words, an adequate education for all students for that? And so as I think about the calculus involved for creating a new tax policy in the state, there's a good place to lodge the notion that all those revenues first have to flow into this lockbox to reach that level. Anything that spills over is fair game for all the other priorities. But I just, if it catches fire, then I will have done my job today.
I don't know, I'm in politics. I've made a few wild-eyed statements over time. Our final question, our second to last question is from Dr. Cheryl Whitaker. Can you give examples of how you partner with other foundations to have more influence to make progress in some of the initiatives you mentioned?
Numerous front and center for everybody is the issue of violence prevention. There's a consortium of foundations, including the McCormick Foundation, Joyce, Field Foundation, Fry Foundation, MacArthur Foundation, who have been working on the issue of violence prevention for the last 5 years. And as we've gained traction, as we've gained the capacity of the crime lab at the University of Chicago, as nonprofits have increased their capacity, like Youth Guidance with the BAM program, Becoming a Man, which connects young people not only with productive activities, but also with mentoring and social-emotional counseling. All of these things come together. And then we've got our corporate partners, JP Morgan Chase, for instance. Each of our trustee banks are very strong, from Northern Trust, Bank of America, Harris Bank, all working together for that. In the area of education, we've got Sprague, we've got Michael Reese working together on that. For Millennium Reserve, right there front and center. The Donnelly Foundation is really important in their leadership for that. So it's virtually every place that we're at, it starts as a funder collaborative. In the area of workforce development, it's a group, I can't leave out the Boeing Company and Nora Morena Cargi and her role, always at the table, always a contributor to there. And you know that I'm really on thin ice here because I've mentioned enough names that there are also so many that I've left somebody out, but I'm trying to cover them all. But it is. Thank you for the question, and it's virtually every one of those areas that we've talked about.
All right, we're going to wrap up the questions with, I think we'll end with a very hard-hitting question that'll make that question about school closing seem mild in comparison. And this is from Graham Grady of Shefsky and Freilich. What can each of us do to support the work of the Chicago Community Trust? You ready?
How much time do I have? I've got an assignment for each and every one of you. You can pick it up on the way out. I've got to acknowledge Graham. He's a close friend, and he's a great champion for the Chicago Community Trust. He's led our African American Legacy Fund, and he is in the front lines of the work that we are doing to create a more inclusive city. I appreciate what he asked for, and the purpose here is not a sales pitch. What's as important is the lines that I talked about in my speech, and that is the more that we align and work together, the stronger we will be, the greater capacity we will have to tackle these tough challenges. Individually, if you are a philanthropist and you want a very efficient mechanism for your philanthropy, we're there to create things like donor-advised funds. If you are a wealthy business person who is selling a business and you want a very low-cost way to manage your philanthropy, we create things like the supporting organizations like S&C Corporation set up a fund for fueling that does amazing philanthropy in the Rogers Park area for that. And that was John Conrad, one of the founders of that, invested $10 million in this organization that takes care of the charitable needs in Rogers Park. And because of the amazing growth of that company and its stock, it's now over $20 million in assets that benefit that community. So there are myriad ways that any of you who are active in your philanthropy, that we are simply a great partner for that. But more than that, it's our ability to continue to work together to really seize these amazing opportunities that lie ahead for Chicago if we just recognize them and go for them.
Thank you, Terry.